I love that it's so real. It's so organic. Good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. We are not blacked out, but we are blacked out. Here we are together. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad to see you, and I'm glad to see that there are so many people here with us right now. Because this is such an important conversation for us to be having, particularly today, as people try to figure out what to do, right?
Yeah, definitely.
How to heal, and just for all the people watching, there are lots of European viewers watching right now. In addition to us, East Coast, West Coast, we're here, right? I wanted to be here and not postpone, because I feel like when you're in the thick of it, that's when it's most organic, right? That's when we're having to make real decisions. My son is right now begging me to go down to One Police Plaza.
Yeah. How old your son? How old your son?
Getting ready to go to college, 17, going to be 18 in a few weeks. And this is probably the worst time he could want to go, right? Because I think, as we watched yesterday, since our conversation, it's escalated.
Yeah, my dad called me. I was on the phone with my dad for an hour last night, and he informed me of a gentleman who was killed by the police at a protest. You know, um, yeah, the protests are they're becoming dangerous, and totally due to the police state that Donald Trump's putting America in. You know,
Yeah.
with his fascist type rule. So it is dangerous, but life in America is dangerous in general. So I think if your son's about to go away to college,
Yeah.
he's a young black man. Um, his powers would be best used him voting, him getting his all his friends to vote, get them to educate themselves about who they should vote for, also voting in local elections, knowing who the police chief is, knowing who the governor is, knowing who the mayor is, having phone numbers, making calls, showing up, and then going to school and educating himself in a profession that, yeah, he can make a living off, but actually can help people through some way, and help all people of color and women, LBG, LGBTs, and all that. That's the best he could do. His services might not be best rendered at a protest catching a rubber bullet in the eye. But I am not at all
I
lessening
appreciate you.
the.
I appreciate we talked a little bit about patriarchy, and about what it's like, as a black man. I feel I want to empower him with his voice, but I want him to be smart with his voice. And that's one thing that's so important, that I suggested that he went live and talked to his friends about what this means, right? And about, again, there's a lot of voting that's taking place right now. And on an international stage, I thought it was interesting that the president said that people are laughing at us. And I think people are watching us and wanting to see this. And so our humanity in dialogue, in voting, because people want to know, what are we doing? And I talked with you a little bit last night about privilege, about having traveled internationally. And when I read your story in Human Shift about your mom not traveling, I was really touched. We didn't talk about that. I lost my mom at a similar age, and her missing some of that experience. While there are so many similar experiences to the 60s, they've had a different experience. We've seen some things, the pain that, and people are
Yeah.
with us.
Oh yeah, and that's why that's one of the main things that's missing with uh American, black people. So let's say it's storytelling, because before when we were in our natural state in Africa, actually I got to finish this book, The Flash of Spirit, which
Yeah.
is about um, Africa Africans becoming black, right, due to slavery, and like, are you Yoruba, and these roots being lost. but also the influences subconsciously that they have in Black culture. But back to what we're saying is, so what we did when we were tribal people, we told stories, right? So you keep telling the story over and over again, and the kids are like, oh, the same story again. Shut up, grandpops. But then something happens in your life, and you have almost like this muscle memory because your grandfather told you that annoying story over and over again. You know, my dad used to always tell me how to deal with police officers. From the moment I was able to hang out and hit the streets of Jamaica, Queens by myself, he'd always tell me how to deal with police officers, how to speak to them, their intention, why they would shoot me without a blink of the eye because they know they're protected by the law, by the judges, by the code, the blue wall of silence, by the mayor, and that my job was to make it back home to him and my mom. And he
Right.
told me all that, and at times I get annoyed about it, but I've never even been arrested, not because I was I never was in a situation where I could be. I knew how to speak to cops, and that came from the training and brainwashing that my mother and father gave me. So it is important to communicate and tell stories over and over again. It's important for women to tell stories, for people of color to tell the stories, for protection, and also to learn and to educate each other. And that's what's missing is people aren't telling stories. We're all siloed. And that's
So
also something that comes with city living, you know what I mean? Like, even if let's say you live in like a projects, you siloed. Even though there's 3,000, 4,000 people in that building, you're siloed because of the way, how small the apartments are, because of how gloomy it is, the color of the walls, everything counts. And you're not a community, and you're living in fear, and you're not telling stories. And so you got to figure out on your own how to deal with cops. You got to figure out on your own on how to go on a job interview, what you should wear to the job interview. You got to figure out on you know oh, I'm stressed out. Maybe I need to speak to a therapist. But no one in your community talks about using therapy. So you
right,
don't go to one because you're a therapist. You know what I mean?
right.
There's a huge stigma in Black communities about therapy. Why? You know what I mean? It's seen as
But
weak.
but
Why?
we
Where does all that come from? So
but
all
we
this
are at a
comes from.
disadvantage. But some of it, and I know people really hate when we talk about slavery and we talk about why we're behind. But one of the things that when you first said that about being storytellers, two things. Of course, I'm thinking about Tulsa, the Tulsa riots, and
I love talking about slavery because slavery is directly connected. So a Black person being hung, like I learned from my girl. She listened to all of the 1619 Project, and
yeah,
she they used to put Black women in the ground, stomach down, and pregnant Black women, and they dig a hole in the ground and face the Black women face down so they can beat them without damaging the baby because they need the baby to be a slave. That trauma, because this is what we're talking about, trauma, that trauma is still in every single Black person that walks in America, all 30 million of us, that trauma. So from a woman being beat with a hole, and her pregnant child's in a hole in the ground so it's protected, up to George Floyd, there's a thread through every single Black person that's been beat, that's been killed, that's been hung. None of it's separated.
well, we carry this trauma not in our DNA. And so when you're talking about this, it's interesting about collective trauma because people have said to me, I don't want to watch Central Park 5. I don't want to watch shows about slavery because what we'd like to do, right, is to avoid it. And when we're avoiding it, we become in denial. And then people, and I brought up privilege around because people have an idea that because we have that we're different, that we are numb from what we see. So there are many times I don't intend to see some of the things that I watch on television. I want to be aware, but my intention isn't to. But we are re-traumatized, and the PTSD that we're experiencing from it can happen regardless of class, can happen regardless. And it's when you brought that, just the idea of the imagery around being put in a grave, belly up, it's
Yeah.
powerful. Until I thought about it, I mean, Do the Right Thing. When Spike has Radio Raheem killed by the police officer in a chokehold and you see the chilling similarities, it is traumatic, right? It is traumatic for us. And I think it is becoming more traumatic for white people to be able to see it and feel it, because the lack of humanity, there's a part of humanity that doesn't allow you to be able to see that.
Oh yeah, I mean, white people are like, you know, they're having like as far as a culture race, they're having like in America, they're having like a midlife crisis, you know, like. But really, when you look at a midlife crisis, them problems been happening, you know, and they're just, you know, now they're realizing like, oh snap, this is what they've been going through, you know. But yeah, you know, that's
So,
welcome
so
to the party.
part of, when we talk about opening our hearts and we talk about breathing, I know, talking about chakras, I had talked to human shift around this idea of making a shift and making a change. We already have a shift and people are coming to worry, to seek out mental health in ways that we never had. I am a child of therapists who didn't believe in therapy because I felt like it would not necessarily help until I went through my own depression and difficulties.
Yeah.
It was like what brought me through was that somebody held for me. What we're doing for people is some of the pain. I still wake up with my chest heavy. I wake up thinking what's going to happen if they, even as I watch images of people, and I don't want to use the word antagonizing, but engaging with police. We know what happens when you engage with police. And I'm not suggesting that they do nothing, but I am suggesting that when I see a cop car or I see a siren, fear is the first thing I feel. Never do I feel protection.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, why would you feel protection? The police are just the Gestapo for the 1%. Police are just Gestapo for the, white male supremacy, and the economic well-being of America. That's what police are, and that's what the military is, and that's the main thing too. Is like, that's what goes to the education, is like, Black people, white people, every color, they got to really understand what this racism, police brutality is collateral damage from white supremacy and from capitalism. And, that's why all these things about Black people being dumb and not as smart and subhuman, the 1% needed the slave owners and the white population to believe these things in order to dehumanize Black people, to get them to do the work to build this country. And it was all in the name of money. So you always got to follow the money to figure out why we're getting treated this way. Obviously, it's a moral issue, but it's not just it's all tied to the money. If you go to, you can talk about the Holocaust, it's tied to money.
Yes.
Hitler brainwashed and duped people to thinking all those horrible things about the Jews and doing those horrible things to Jews because it was an economic play. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, the main problem with white people and white men mainly is that they don't want to break down the power. They don't want to share power or give up all the power or share the money. It's like today we got a record industry blackout day. It's a joke. James Brown and so many other Black artists died broke when they should have literally had hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet record industry people are posting, oh, we're in solidarity with Black people. No, you're not, because you're in solidarity when you give up the power. Men ain't in solidarity with women until we give up the power. And that's it. Everything else is BS. And that's, to me, that's one of the main conversations that's to be had, is that white people can post all they want about, oh, I'm in solidarity with Black people and blah, 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 blah. I don't need you to post anything. I need you to give up the power and privilege you have in your life to people of color.
When we think about those shifts, and I think about when I'm working with people one-on-one, a lot of the work I do is individual. And when people ask me, how are we going to heal and how are we going to trauma, part of it is really around conversation and difficult conversations. I had a conversation yesterday about not wanting people to feel badly, not wanting, and there's this white gaze around the idea, and I'm sure you've experienced, like, what will they think? And we're slowly moving past the idea of that, right? That somebody had posted, Michael Jordan finally is speaking out. And again, the reason that people had sort of criticized him was because they felt that it was a capitalistic idea about selling shoes. The moral compass that's moving forward is around this shift, right? And I know deep breathing and around the shop, it's this collective idea that if we impact individuals, I don't think people want to give up power. That's one of the reasons why the buildings are burning, right? Like, we know Target's going to be okay, but these shifts happen in conversations. These shifts happen when people are not afraid of this idea that they might lose their stake. And that's sort of what you're talking about, because prior to this, we have examples. I mean, if I tell you that I had not thought about Abner Louima, when you brought up Abner Louima, and anybody that doesn't know, you know, New Yorkers, you read the case. When I think about the specific hate and penetration of what was the intent there to destroy, it's a visceral thing, but I had intentionally put it out of my head so much that it didn't come to, when I think about police brutality, and I don't know if that's intentional, because they want us to stop thinking about how these things work in sync, right? Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, right?
Yeah.
But they
I
add
think,
to our...
I think the media works in news cycles, right? And the media has to put things out there that get loads of people to watch and read so they can sell advertising space. That's the sole purpose of it, unless it's a non-for-profit media organization. So you become what you watch.
Right.
So if you're seeing Abner Louima, he got sodomized with a pleasure in the police bathroom, blah, 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 cops got off, and then the story disappears, what's your mind going to do? Your mind's going to forget about it. And then it's on to the next story about, you know, the Jets, you know, Jets going to make it to the playoffs again. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Or like, you know, J-Lo and A-Rod are trying to buy Shea Stadium or whatever. BS that they talk about things that really don't matter. Whereas if the news was always because NPR is always talking about this stuff. So if you only listen to NPR, more Abner Louima and all this stuff's gonna be on your mind, because they never stop bringing it up. They never stop talking about what women go through. They never stop talking about what people of color go through. They never stop talking about what gays go through. They don't stop talking about what ableist people go through. You know, they don't start talking about any of that. But regular news media, it's like music videos. 3 minutes about this, and then they run the music video for a while, and then a new video comes out. And then you forget that video ever existed, you know? So in part, it's what sources are we getting our information from, you know? And it reflects in our minds. But also, yeah, I do believe, you know, that is a part of trauma where you black things out, you know? But
you know, part of what I wanted to do, this is not a think tank, right? What I wanted to, and what I'm appreciating about what you're saying is, some things are not on our frontal lobe, because the programming has been so effective, right? The social media has been such an inundated way that people get the news, that people get the information. So broadening this in terms of conversations, I think one of the things that we hadn't talked about was the virus, right? And how some of what has happened with the virus has caused us to have this, you know, I feel that the international aspects were something that would bring us together. The fact that we were not alone. To then have the idea that in the middle of this pandemic, where people close to, I'm sure you and I we know personal people, particularly people of color, who are affected, it feels like the sort of a perfect storm of things happening that are
Yeah.
impacting, right? And I don't know if you and I, if we were talking about, or if I read it, talking about Madam C.J. Walker's, it was the time when she was the most prolific during the Spanish flu, like when her business grew, or when people, and I don't necessarily want to just talk about business, but about creating space, so anybody that, for example, doesn't even like what we're talking about, or wants it to be from a different perspective, they have an opportunity to have their own conversations around things that impact them.
Oh yeah, yeah. People do, but people rather people rather chastise and tell other people what to do. You know, I remember one time I posted something about the plight of black people, and someone left in the comments, "What about Palestinian people?" or something like that. And I said, I'm in solidarity with you guys, but go post something about it. But humans, some reason, they like to spend time like, well, why are you talking about that? And when they could just go and talk about the thing that they feel is more pertinent, or just as pertinent. It's impossible for me and you here to cover every issue. You know, it's impossible for an organization to cover every issue. But it's important that we're in solidarity and not siloed, and we have the same amount of compassion for every other culture or people that are struggling under the guise of capitalism and white supremacy, and be in solidarity and think about them, you know? Like, I'll give you an example. I was talking about this morning on text. White people keep saying, you know, I've learned so much from black culture. I love black music, art. It's influenced me. I work in this. And that's why we have to help black people. No, you have to help black people because we're humans and we deserve the same rights as you.
Right.
So what? Because you're not so into salsa, you're not going to help out Spanish people? Because they're messed up out here too. Mexicans, we can say Mexicans are worse off in America financially than black people. But because you don't emulate how they dress or their music, so you don't feel so. I got to help Mexicans. I got to help black people because they're so cool. It's more BS. It's like, and that's the thing. People are not getting to the root of it. Is you do this for people because they're humans.
Right.
And capitalism and white supremacy has made you dehumanize people of color. And white people keep finding excuses. Like, that's an excuse. Like, oh, well, we're so inspired by black culture, so this is why I have to stand up for them. No, because we're humans. And also, y'all should be banging out for Native Americans. It don't stop with black people. Like, we're on land that was taken from Native Americans. Go see how Native Americans are living on reservations. COVID has affected Native Americans immensely, you know? And it's just like,
so when I think about that, that's the collective consciousness around trauma, right? This idea that if you could watch this video, and it's something about visual, it's something that I appreciate about Human Shift as a magazine, because while there's a lot of dense reading, the pictures evoke such emotion. And when I think about us, like people, you and I talking, and I think about what's going to be important for people, it's going to be that they see the humanity and not past. When you mentioned, we were talking yesterday about going to the mailbox and people not knowing you and seeing you and thinking that you're an intruder, right?
Yeah.
I can't, right? That happens so often, in which, because we don't fit into the box of what the expectation. Somebody coming to you and say, "Do you do reggae music?" Right? And you're like, "What?"
Oh
right?
my God. Yeah.
Right?
I
And
mean, you already know the type of comments I get. Yeah. It's funny. It's like, that's what I'm saying. The dehumanization is across a spectrum that is so broad that literally, if you made a to scale dehumanization spectrum, it probably could wrap around the earth twice. Because I've had it all happen to me, from harassment from police to, in my upper middle class white neighborhood in LA, when I go to check my mailbox, white woman is texting my neighbor, another white woman, "Hey, there's this black guy with a flannel shirt and with dreads going through your mailbox, and their neighbor's like, "Oh, that's Tremaine. He lives here." And I've been living here for 2 years. And then she says sorry to her. This woman felt no need to write me a letter, to come and seek me out and apologize, because she's not thinking about the trauma that could cause me. She's not thinking that, oh, I'm just like, and that's another thing too. White people like to do this thing, especially in LA and New York and in Europe. Those Southern white hicks, and they like to separate for them.
Right.
But that woman who was texting around that there's a black man with dreads stealing out the mailbox. She's no different than those people that were texting around on that Facebook group when Ahmaud was killed. Right. Same exact thing. I didn't get killed, and I'm more privileged than Ahmaud because I live in an area where there's a supposed less chance of that happening to me. But it's the same exact thing. And then white people need to see that every level of dehumanization that you do to people of color leads to George Floyd. There's nothing separated. It's all one thread. It's all connected. And black people need to realize that too, because black people do that thing like, oh, she didn't mean it in that way.
Right.
Oh, but I know them for years. Our kids play together. He just spoke out of turn. It's everything's deep. Everything is connected. You know?
But if we don't, but the thing is being comfortable enough to talk about it, to be uncomfortable, because it a lot of times they just won't mention it, right? Because you're cool and you're their friend and you're an exception to the rule, right? Right? And people want to rationalize why George Zimmerman might have killed Trayvon because he didn't know him and he looked bigger and he had a hood on. And there are all of these ominous reasons, right? A black man running in a neighborhood. I have to tell you, my son asked to go to a trip and he wants to go, and he'll be the only black child. And I said to the other mothers, this is something that I have to be cognizant of.
Yes.
Because I don't know, right? And, I love that the mom said to me, I would have never thought about that. I never would think about that. And I understand, because you don't travel in a black body in which we are constantly feeling, right? Like, do I belong? And we talked yesterday about not double consciousness and sort of triple consciousness around the idea of who we are and how people perceive us, right? So growing up, I want to talk a little bit about growing up. And we think about like how many decades and how we've been through this. I mean, it's super painful for me when people say I can't watch how they see us, because how they see us really is reflective of how railroading without videotape, right?
So here's the thing. I'll say this to the people that say it's too painful for them to watch. Can they see us? I lived in New York during that time.
Yeah.
My older brother was the same. That happened in 88, 86, something like that. So I was a little boy. I was born in 81. My older brother's 9 years older than me. He was the same age as those boys that was arrested. So if you think it's painful for you to watch it, how painful you think it is to live in New York and you go to Central Park, you go to Casino Park, and you see Donald Trump taking out an ad saying that these kids need to get the death penalty, when we all knew from Jump Street that those kids didn't rape that white woman. It wasn't a question. Whether you was a little black boy, or whether you was my dad, who was probably in his 30s at the time, you knew those kids didn't rape that woman. And you see Donald Trump taking out an ad in the New York Times, and you see all this stuff, all this coverage. So that's a point of privilege, saying it's too painful for me to watch it. Those guys was in jail for almost 30 years. So what is your pain to watch it? They actually was in jail for something they didn't do. What is your pain? Your pain is nothing. Your pain is made up. It's mythology.
So part of what happens in therapy, though, oftentimes is that people think that they're devoid of that because they reach some sort of social class ladder, and so they don't realize how it impacts them until in their Brooks Brothers suit, they come into an elevator and people leave, or people. Again, there are deeper levels to thinking about yourself, because again, you start to begin to separate. So two things I just want to tap into that.
Yeah.
the black on black crime is often the thing that I get when people say to me, well, look at what's happening in Chicago. Look at the idea that there are groups of people who destroy themselves. There is no solidarity. And I'm not necessarily asking you to have a solution, but there is a hard thing for us to think about critically when we think about, like, how do we then move past it so that people can begin to see us more clearly? Because if they can't see as we see, even with Rodney King, I mean, the fact that we can come up with so many examples is really sickening if you really think about it. But yeah, on tape, the person sees what happened, regardless of every drug. He could have been on crack, heroin, you know, and fentanyl at the same time, still didn't deserve that. How do we then explain or talk to people about what happens? I mean, we understand systematic racism, but are there other things that you think that when you talk to your peers or friends about black on black crime?
Follow the money. Because here's an example. There's a upper middle class black enclave in Sag Harbor. You know how much black on black crime there is there? None. You know why? Because everyone's economically and educationally sound. Mm-hmm. You go Southside Chicago, why is there crime? Because people aren't economically and educationally sound. And also, it's easy. That's what it is. Like, black on black crime is collateral damage of social inequalities. That's just the reality. Yeah. That if you have people who aren't educated, who don't have a high level of self-worth, who are told all these negative things about themselves, and then believe them, who were slaves and then go into years of indentured servitude to what we are now as black people in America, and you don't got no money, and it's easy to get guns, what's gonna happen?
Right. It's you know, even when I'm addressing gaps, people often ask me, how are we going to deal with the gaps? So, you know, I can only say what I can do individually and sort of support for people, but people are always looking for solutions, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I offer a sliding scale, people that don't have insurance, like I can do different types of things, but ultimately a lot of what this is going to be around is conversations, around people organizing in ways. I mean, the first thing you said about voting, and I was trying to decide how I felt about it because John Legend was talking about it, and I was thinking to myself, and I support John, but it sounded like from a place of privilege in which he was saying about not destroying property. I don't think that anybody should destroy, right?
Yeah.
We should be creating and building, but there's going to be a traumatic impact from even watching these marches if nothing comes about this, in whether it's in November, right? If we mm-hmm. continue to move this way. But I do think that there's a shift that's really happening, a universal shift that's an international, the way we're having more, you know, international and also white people putting their bodies on the front lines around mm-hmm. this. I think that's going to be a big part of the shift. And maybe men are thinking and talking in ways that they hadn't been thinking and talking about in terms of patriarchy and how they look at, well, I'm not in a position to speak for women. I think that's a really important place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, so it all comes down to education, because it's like, you know, I already see now, like, voting and politics is like a long run game, right? So I already hear people saying, but we don't want to vote for Biden, right? You got to vote for Biden to get to the Democratic or whatever candidate 8 years from now, 4 years from now. We got to rock with this guy and then get control of the House back, keep voting, keep putting pressure on, you know, the local government, and keep putting pressure. It's a long game, you know?
Chess, not checkers.
Yeah, it's 4D chess. Chess table floating.
4D. I love that. You know,
the chess table is floating. Yeah.
trauma, and I want to reconnect to that, because I feel like there's in therapy we talk about it's what we're not saying, it's what we're not saying, it's what you don't, it's not on the forefront. And I see in the comments people are talking about reparations, and I want to talk about that conversation around, does money help, right? There's a news story about 14 million billion, maybe it was even trillion. And I have mixed feelings about reparations, because I want us to do some work around healing, but I want to, do you have feelings about reparations?
Yeah. Most of my feelings about reparations are contained in an essay written by Tinashe Coates. People can Google it. Just Google that writer's name. It's in the Atlantic, and it's all there. Like, reparations tie into trauma. So when you get what you should have from Jump Street, it's not about, because if they do reparations, if they do it mathematically correct,
Yeah.
every Black person ain't going to be all of a sudden rich. But you get reparations, it's like acknowledgement. Acknowledgement does have a metric number tied to it. Acknowledgement. You know? That's what I'm trying to say about the record industry. You get record industry and the reparations thing. Oh, we're in solidarity with all the Black artists and Black people because the American record industry is built off Black music 110% off of jazz, blues, slaves singing in the fields. That's music in America and modern music in the world. Rolling Stones, Beatles, Justin Bieber, Justin Timberlake, we can keep going. John Mayer, whoever, it comes from us, Jack from us. So you could say like, oh, we're in solidarity with you. But if their record labels are like, we're going to back pay every artist dead, we're giving it to their estate, living, we're going to back pay them what they're supposed to get, even if it breaks the record industry, then Black artists can be like, that's solidarity.
Right.
So that's what it is with reparations. And it's like, yeah, I need them. I need them. I need them because I need them. We all need them. I need it because it's just like, it's what's owed to us. We built the country, and
so
I
no,
need it. I need to see my grandmother's 93. I need to see her get that check.
it's interesting because I took a 90-year-old friend of the family to the polls, because they were living in LA, and their grandfather wanted to vote for Obama. So we went and took him, and he was crying as a war veteran and saying like he never thought this would be this day, and he really thought it was going to be a change in how the perception of who we were going to be perceived as. Because part of what, and I know people are talking about, it's this acknowledgement and validation of our humanity. In this watershed moment that we're sort of having, and a lot of people have different feelings about that, because they're like, we've seen this before, except I have not seen people in Salt Lake City and people in Denver and whole groups of white people saying we're going to shut this down. I think that is a change that I've witnessed. But how it affects my mental health is that you're speaking up and you're acknowledging not only what you did wrong with respect to reparations, but the reason that your companies are on the stock exchange is on the backs of the people that look like us, right?
Example, can I interject?
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. Example, you said companies, so someone correct me if I'm wrong. Nike said, for once, don't do it. Nike, 80% of Nike's contributions are to the Republican Party. So that's not solidarity, Nike posting that. It ain't. Are you really helping us? And your whole shit wasn't built off Prefontaine. It was built off a Black man named Michael Jordan. So if you're donating 80% of your contributions, someone correct me after this talk if I'm wrong, to the Republican Party, that post don't mean nothing. It don't mean nothing.
Right.
You know, and
And
that's the thing with like to me with white people, if white people aren't willing to lose their jobs, lose their health care, lose their lives, lose everything to help out people of color, it don't really mean nothing to me. Because that's what black people been doing. Whether it was Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, George Floyd, whoever, we've been losing our lives. There have been some few white people, but when it's like, because think about it, again, it's a number thing. How many black people are there in America? 20 to 30 million. How many white people in America? 200 million, 175 million, maybe even more. So they could, if white people really wanted to, they could shut shit down in America for us and change everything in probably a month. That's the fact. And so, cool, I like people seeing white people coming along, but to me, it's still just white guilt. It's just, it's white guilt. And it's great to see it, cool. But when I see like white people like, we're not paying taxes until this happens, I can't feel it. Because I don't feel like white people still feel it. They don't feel that out of 100,000 people in America, 73,000 that died are black. I can't see that they really feel it.
So it's a conversation I have when I said, when people are dying, I see my brother, when black men are dying, I see my brother, I literally see my husband, my father, my brother, my sons, right? There are people that are like, that's sad, right? But they don't necessarily make that real connection. So what you're talking about is, what are you willing to do to see this happen? What are you willing? And I'll tell you, when you think about it, right? People are not willing to lose in order to see it win, right? Because it's, if you get, I will not get, right?
Yep.
Now, there'll be bunches of people who will say, do I have to get rid of my Nikes? I mean, I just got a bad pair of, gold Air Force Ones. Now you're making me feel guilty, and I'm being funny. But I think we have to be more socially responsible. I was having this conversation this morning about blackout, and he's not gonna like me, but my husband was like, well, maybe you shouldn't do it. I mean, maybe you should wait. And I was like, let's do a little more research about who is gaining and what we're doing and why we would make a decision around it. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but there are a lot of times that we are willing to accept things. I mean, you actually, a bomb, I wish I had sound effects, because when I think about what could be effective.
Like Funk Flex?
Like Funk Flex,
You need the
exactly.
Funk Flex bomb.
I feel like I need that so that, but it's like, right, people could just make a decision. I'm not paying my taxes, or I'm not doing something, and it's going to sound crazy, but people want credit. I had at least 2 people write, but we are the country that elected Obama twice, right? And that was very nice. And he is I have the most respect. However, in terms of action-oriented steps upon moving things and changing things, we have evidence. Here we are, right? A lot. These are some of the aftermaths of our 8 years.
Listen, salute to Obama. Eloquent guy. Black people still getting killed while he was in office. There wasn't less police brutality when Obama was in office. We can get to a lot of things. So because enough pressure wasn't put on him by the people. So I don't even 100% blame him, but there wasn't enough pressure put on him by the people. So again, it's like, what's the amount of pressure? Because here's the thing. Anti-looting, anti-protest, anti-riots. When Martin Luther King got killed, people rioted for like, I don't know, a week. Guess what bill got signed 3 days after the riot stopped, after Martin Luther King got killed? The Civil Rights Bill. Martin Luther King didn't even live to get to see the Civil Rights Bill signed into office, signed into law. But it got pushed over the edge because people were going to tear up the country because he got killed.
Right.
So, but okay, let's go to nonviolent protest. I think the boycotts that were started off by Rosa Parks on the buses, 300 plus days, that changed that situation by boycotting. So boycotting works. You know, if everyone, trust me, if everyone boycotted Amazon, Jeff Bezos would be out there at the protest with no mask, COVID or no COVID, with a sign if we boycotted them. So people don't realize the power they have, you know, especially white people don't realize the power they have to help everyone that's under their foot in the world.
Right.
You know?
So I know, you know, it's funny when people push for solutions, it's like anything else. There are going to be a number of pieces that we're going to put together, voting, boycotting. You know, there's a lot of people calling for a collective voice. Who is our voice? Who is the person that we stand behind? Even when I'm fact checking stories and different things, I don't know what to believe. I mean, very often I listen to NPR, but I'm a victim. I mean, and I watch CNN to get a lot of my news.
Yeah.
Right. And some of that's because I need to see the visual images of what's happening. Right. I want to watch the look on people's faces. But if children, how, as the children are watching, what is the message you think that children are going to get around what we're doing or not doing?
What'd you say?
Children, what do you think children are as they're watching us doing or not doing? And by children, I'm talking about anybody under 18 watching this happen, and then us saying, yeah, it was just like this, and then wanting them to know. I'm sort of bringing it full into your point about stories, right?
Yeah.
How do we then tell them a story about what happened here, and then tie into it? Because I can remember boycotts that were not 300 days. And I'm not going to mention the labels or things, but we quickly forget and move forward, right, when they come out with a brand new. How are we going to really impact this idea around our humanity? Because that's what's tied to the trauma. I see that it was traumatizing. People want to say, and poverty is a huge part, but how are we going to move to a different place around this?
We're going to move to a different place through true self-esteem, lack of the salivation that we do for Western ideals. Back to this book.
Yeah.
Feel great about being Black. Feel great about having descendants from Africa. Feel great that we were slaves and we're still here and we survived it. So then, instead of, and the reason why we don't boycott is because, okay, let's say we'll try to boycott Vogue, but then Vogue would be, Anna Wintour will be like, okay, we'll put Naomi on the cover, right? Or we'll put Adjua on the cover. So then we stop the boycott because we want that validation, because to us, the highest level is to have a white person kiss you on the head and say, we like what you do. So if you have that you go internal and feel that good about yourself, about your culture, you know, because race is, you know, feel that good about your culture and about your ancestors and about current what's going on, they can't placate you with the validation. You know, like even look at myself. You know, it's like Black. You know, I'm a you know, middle class dude. You know, and my financially, and it's like, what middle class neighborhoods are there for me to live in LA that are Black or just mixed, not gentrified, just mixed? I don't know. You know, where I grew up was a middle class Black neighborhood until the crack epidemic hit in the 1980s. You know, Miles Davis used to live in St. Albans. You know what I mean? But there was no one like him living there when my parents moved there. My parents moved there because they couldn't afford to buy a house in Bayside, Queens, or in a white neighborhood, in a safe neighborhood. So when I moved to Jamaica, Queens, My dad had a decent paying, good job, TV News Emmy Award winning cameraman. And he had to move to Jamaica, Queens, where our first week there, the Jamaican spot got shot up. And dudes rode down my block on a BMX with the gun still smoking. Mm. That's what my dad moved from Georgia, had to move his family around. So that's, you know what I mean? That's how deep it is. And he's got an Emmy Award. Yeah. Ain't none of his co-workers at CBS have to tell their kids not to go to the corner store because the block got shot up. Yeah. So that's, you know, the thing is, we have to get so much internal love for ourselves that we can't be bought by their validation, and that we don't like, oh man, you know, for me, the highest level for me is living in the white neighborhood, or the highest level for me is being on Vogue, or the highest level for me ain't having a Levi's collab. The highest level for me is if I got to do something with, as far as like creative stuff, if I got to do something with, I don't know, Kirby from Prayer Moss, or Virgil, or Theaster Gates, you know, who I have done stuff with, to work with A-Side. That's my highest level, to work with, be acknowledged by someone from my culture that's gone through what I go through, and they see something in me. It's not me being ordained by some white fashion person or white art person. You know, but
that's a higher, but that's such a, what's so important about what we're saying is that we're really moving in this validation, because what we're making spaces. Again, I have to reference that article when Ebony talks about wanting to bring young people to Africa, wanting to provide, and that was the point I was going to make about your mom, and about, it's like, I want people to see beyond the scope of their small neighborhoods, to see beyond, so that artists like you said, when the story about Virgil going into Louis Vuitton, people, this happens often. People can't imagine that you're the person. This happens to all of us. So when we hire people that look like us, that's a validation that's around, not only just passing a baton, but shifting from this idea, right? Because people are comfortable if there's one of us in the room. People are comfortable if there's, right? But the idea that then you're going to bring your friends, and then you're going to change it to what it's not going to be, right? That's an important idea, that that there needs to be more than just one of us, right? But that we want to be able to have, and a collective voice, that just one person winning isn't enough, right? We need more than just one.
Yeah, you need more than just one. You need everyone to have. Here's the thing. If you see a white person homeless living on the street, it's either mental health reason why they're there, or they kind of made a choice. You can't say that about no woman or person of color. Right. Because women, from white women down, and all people of color, have a fucking slew of obstacles that can end your ass on the street, and it was not created by you. So basically, we need to get people of color to the point that if you see a person of color homeless on the street, it's just a micro for macro. You could be like, this person either got a mental health issue, or they don't want it. You can't say that if you see a person of color, be like, yo, that man just didn't want it. And that's why I hate when, like, the thing would be like, you know, back in the day, it used to be a thing. Oh, look at, like, don't use me as an example to put down another black person. Like, look what Tremaine achieved. No. Every successful black person in America is a mixture of hard work and luck, and also talent, and slipping through the cracks of white supremacy, and you somehow make it through. And you try to pull black people, other black people, people of color with you. You fuck around, get your arm torn off, trying to pull them through that fissure in white supremacy, that crack, because it's jagged as hell. You know why? Because any black person that has made it through, you got all kinds of cuts through making through it. You know what I mean?
I do.
Like, it's like sorry, just to say the last one thing. It's like the end of 12 Years a Slave. to me, that movie's about a micro macro for what black people who make it out go through. Because the movie almost ends with him looking back at the girl with one eye, and you can see the guilt that he's left her behind.
Yeah.
But he's trying to get back to his family. And that's the state that black people and people of color are currently in. We're siloed. We got to leave. How many people did I leave behind in Jamaica, Queens to go to London to work for Marc Jacobs? I couldn't take them with me.
No, and that's what's one of the reasons why we, right, being an exceptional Negro or being somebody, because again, people do that with us, with this idea of using you as an example. But we need these salons. I know they're getting ready to cut us off, but we need opportunities to be able to speak, and so that lots of people are going to have opinions in these comments on people about what should happen and how it should look. But it's this dialogue that's so important that other people need to continue to be having, maybe not on the same format, but it doesn't begin and end with us. It actually, it's how it's going to continue, right? And even the fact that you referenced 12 Years a Slave, because it's a story that's really emanates from a place, right? So what will be the story that they tell about us as we move forward, right? What will be the story about us because again, as we begin to have water hosed on us, the military coming in, it does feel like there's a larger scope of people that are involved. But you're right. I guess the demand is really for people who are in positions of power to make different choices.
Yeah, 100%. And the black people got to, in my opinion, black people got to stop putting all the onus on these celebrity black people, because they just human beings, man. And it's like they went through, you going through hell to live in a project. Well, whatever black celebrity went through hell to extend through that, and you both still in a perpetual state of hell. You know what I mean? Like, I see in the comments people going off about Virgil. Y'all can feel however you want about Virgil. But I tell you this, here's a fact. Virgil was anointed artistic director of Louis Vuitton. When this happened recently, he went to a Louis Vuitton store, I think it was in Paris or in America, and the security guard, who was black, stopped him from coming in because he didn't know who he was. He just thought he was some random African-looking black dude that had no business in there.